Good morning. Welcome to another edition of E.W. Jackson for America. Great to be with you again this morning. It is Friday, and I want to remind you that if you're in the area where I am, where my church is, and the church is at 943 Canal Drive in Chesapeake, Virginia. If you're in that area, let me make sure my sound levels are good. If you're in that area, come on by. I'll be there on Sunday morning, 11 a.m. for worship service. We start live streaming at about 11:20 in most Sundays, about 11:20. So if you're not in the area, please join in with our live stream. If you are in the area, stop on by. We'll be glad to see you. That's 11 a.m. Sunday morning, 943 Canal Drive in Chesapeake, Virginia. Well, this is Friday. I usually give emphasis on Friday to our need for your prayers, your contributions, your support. So let me just remind you that on June the 11th, we have our Stand Awards dinner. We're honoring Brigitte Gabrielle, Johnny Hunter, Sandy Rios, Gary Hambrick, and posthumously honoring the late Bishop Dean Nelson. We're going to have a great time, It's really shaping up to be a wonderful dinner. The tickets are $125. We are trying to get to 50 sponsors, and I think the number hasn't changed yet. I think we're about 17. I haven't really added any new ones as yet, but we're certainly hoping to, and I'm working on that every single day for the most part, folks, every single day. So if you can sponsor, go to the website, standamerica.us, and sign up as a sponsor. If you can't sponsor, just go and buy some tickets. And if you can't do that because maybe you can't come or maybe the tickets are a little bit too pricey for you, then make a donation to the effort. This is our biggest fundraiser of the year. It's the fundraiser that supplies about half of our annual budget. In fact, but we're hoping that this year it will supply the full annual budget for the year and take some of the pressure off me in terms of fundraising just to make sure that we can pay our bills as opposed to fundraising to make sure that we can expand our program. So I appreciate your prayers and your support and your contributions in that regard. Standamerica.us is the website. Standamerica.us is the website, so you can go there and check that out. Okay, I talked yesterday about a very important subject, loyalty. And in fact, I talked about that on Truth and Liberty last night. If you got a chance to catch the program, Truth and Liberty on Andrew Wommack's GospelTruth.tv network, soon to be a cable network, by the way. And I'm the Thursday host for Truth and Liberty. And they've got obviously several hosts, Janet Porter and Richard Harris, and there are a couple of, Alex McFarland, and of course, Andrew Wommack. So I think that's the lineup for the week. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about that and go on to some other specific issues, because I didn't get into the fact that, or maybe I did, but I know I got into it last night on Andrew Wommack's Truth and Liberty, that there are appropriate levels of loyalty. God is number one. We owe our first loyalty to him, but there are appropriate levels of loyalty to people and principles. And so, for example, when I quoted, do not remove the ancient landmarks which your father have set, Proverbs 22:28. And I said, so we owe loyalty. I took an oath to the Constitution of the United States as a Marine. I owe loyalty to that Constitution. We owe loyalty, obviously, to our families. We owe loyalty to the Declaration of Independence, the founding documents. We owe loyalty to the rule of law. We owe loyalty to the Judeo-Christian foundations of our nation. So there is a hierarchy, if you will. God first, but then everything else falls into place. And when you're dealing with people who have no loyalty whatsoever to God, generally speaking, it means they have no loyalty to the country and no loyalty to any important principles, the ancient landmarks which our fathers have set. No loyalty to them either. So, and just in case I sneeze. So we are in a real quandary and frankly a crisis within when you've got people within the country who have absolutely no loyalty to the country whatsoever. Oh, by the way, let me add, because I know I didn't say this, it means loyalty to the American people. And so we've got people in our country who have no loyalty to the principles of our nation, but they also have no loyalty to the American people because those principles are set forth for the protection and well-being of the American people. They have no loyalty to it whatsoever. I just read an article this morning about the number of banks that have cooperated with the national intelligence agencies to spy on Americans without warrants. Well, think about that. That means you have no loyalty to the Constitution whatsoever. Because what these banks should say is, well, no, we cannot do that without a warrant because we honor the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures, and we have loyalty to the American people and to our customers not to violate their privacy. But no, they happily went along. Happily went along because they have no loyalty to the people, they have no loyalty to the Constitution, and they have no loyalty to the country. Because if they did, principle would say, no, I can't do that. That violates my understanding of the protections built into our Constitution for our citizens. And we're not going to be a part of undermining that. We're not going to be a part of subverting that. We're not going to be a part of betraying that. But happily did it. The illegal immigration. This is another betrayal of the country. And Joe Biden has thrown open the floodgates because he doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about the country. He doesn't care about the Constitution. He doesn't care about the rule of law. The only thing they care about is their agenda. That's it. That's all that matters to them. When you're dealing with people who are disloyal and they're backstabbing and they're untrustworthy, frankly, there's nothing that is beyond them. There's nothing that they won't do. I believe that, folks. Look, let me go back to something very fundamental here. When the effort to legitimize homosexuality first began, it really began back in the late 1960s, but it really accelerated in the 80s. And I was involved in Massachusetts in one of the first efforts. I still don't know whether Massachusetts or California was the first to pass a so-called gay rights bill. You know what? I'm going to find out right now for you because I often refer to that, but I know I was fighting that issue in the early 1980s in Massachusetts. Okay, let's see. Well, I didn't get the answer that I thought I was going to get because it's conflating decriminalizing homosexuality with a so-called gay rights bill. So let me ask specifically, when did Massachusetts pass its gay rights bill? Again, so-called 1989. 1989, Massachusetts passed its so-called gay rights bill. And in fact, folks, that decade of the 1980s, remember I told you when I owned a radio station there in Boston, I couldn't get pastors to help me oppose this abomination. And I went on the radio and started editorializing about it. And when the church members started hearing about it and realizing what was at stake, they then, and we're talking about a predominantly black population because it was a gospel radio station, that was our primary market, They went to their churches and started talking to their pastors and asking their pastors, is what then Reverend Jackson, is what he's saying true? Is it? And suddenly, well, what are we doing about it? What are we doing about it? Suddenly the pastors got very interested. And I took buses of people down to the State House and opposed it. But ultimately, in 1989, it passed. I was out of the radio business in Massachusetts by 1991, a couple of years later. So in spite of all the efforts we put in, we could not stop it from ultimately passing. And by the way, it took them 17 years. So that means they started this process in, 1972? Or early 1970s. They started trying to get it done. Now, so that was 1989. So maybe it was California, because I think California was ahead of Massachusetts. So when did California? Wow, that can't be right. That can't be right. This is saying 2014. That can't possibly be right. We know Proposition 8 in California, so I don't know, but it does appear then that Massachusetts was ahead of California even. Well, that maybe that wouldn't surprise us, because during the 1980s, California was Reagan territory. So maybe that doesn't surprise us. So it looks like Massachusetts was, in fact, the first state to actually pass a so-called gay rights bill, which is just an abomination. Now, why did I go back to all that? I went back to that to say, I haven't lost my train of thought. I went back to that to say, once you eliminate God's standards, well then, what are the new standards? Right? What are the new ones, and who makes them? Right? Who makes them? Well, obviously, once you eliminate God's standards, then the person or the people or the group or the agency or the government that makes the new standards is whoever has the power to force it on everybody else. Right? Who has the power to persuade people, the power to push things through. So that, again, might then makes right. There's no inherent right. It's might, it's power that makes right. So once you say homosexuality is not sin, it's a good thing, it's nothing wrong with it, and we celebrate and all that, we got pride in it. Once you start down that road, well, what's next? The people who are in favor of this stuff are people, first of all, who do not know God, therefore they have no relationship with truth as God's word sets it forth. They just don't care about that. Again, these are moral and cultural relativists. There's your truth and there's my truth, and your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth. The two can be contradictory, but what they really mean is my truth is the truth and the only thing that matters. And if you believe something contrary to that, we just got to stop you, censor you, get rid of you. That's really what they mean. But so it's their subjective way or the highway. That's really what they're saying. I should say is going in, not you and me, and I trust not the whole country, because the polls are telling us that most Americans agree with you and me. You wouldn't know that from the Marxist Socialist No Brains channel. You wouldn't know that from the Communist News Network, and you wouldn't know that from the Alphabet Soup networks. You wouldn't really even know it from Fox necessarily, or for that matter from Newsmax either, because again, these are conservative. Some of these are conservative leaning, but they're not Christian or biblical worldview outlets. Okay, so you wouldn't really know from them that most of the country agrees with us. So for example, they just did a poll about mass deportations. And you say mass deportations, ooh, that's so draconian. That sounds terrible. You're going to be rounding people up. When I ran for president, I said that there was going to be a need for mass deportation, and that there had to be a zero tolerance policy for illegal immigration and illegal immigrants, and you got to round them up and put them out. And I said, though, once you start that process, it would do two things. Number one, a lot of people would self-deport because they would be tired of running all the time and ducking and hiding all the time, because they would know we're looking for them. And the moment we find you, we're going to deport you. And B, it would stop the influx, because people would say, well, there's no need in getting into America because you can't rest. They're not going to leave you alone. They're going to keep hunting you until they catch you and put you out. Then, of course, I argued that we ought to do away with birthright citizenship in terms of, and I have a constitutional amendment that I proposed, that if you don't have a biological parent who is an American citizen, I wouldn't care if you were born under the flag at the Capitol building, or you were born under Mount Rushmore. You are not a citizen unless you have at least one biological parent who is an American citizen. You are not a citizen by virtue of your mama giving birth here. That's where we need to go. You do those two things, illegal immigration problem virtually over, ended. Because people are going to stop coming, because they know it doesn't do them any good to get in, because basically they're going to be hunted from the moment they get into the country. And that's exactly what we would do. We might have to do that for several years. But I guarantee you, you do that for a while, and the illegal immigration problem would shrink to virtually nothing. Because as opposed to being waved in now and being told, oh, well, yeah, just come on in. And, oh, by the way, show up in court in 10 years, okay? Instead of that, you go to the border, you don't get in. You cross the border out the report, but we've got 1.6% growth. Folks, a 1.6% growth, that is stagnation, okay? Might not be recession because we're not shrinking, not in the negative growth area, but it's stagnation, because that's virtually no growth at all. And when an economy stops growing, guess what? Income stops growing. So while we've got a slowing economy that may be grinding to a halt in terms of growth, we've got inflation still raging at about 3.7%, which is about 3 times what it ought to be. And people are feeling it. I mean, at this point, it seems to be universal. Everybody who ever goes to a supermarket walks away going, I bought 2 or 3 items. It cost me $110. It cost me $120. Because the people who are governing our country do not care about your food bill, do not care about your ability to make ends meet, and do not care about your well-being or the well-being of your family. They only care about their own political power and their own privilege and their own economic well-being as well, because these are the same people who are basically selling us to communist China in order to enrich themselves. So, but let me get back to this point. When you eliminate God's standards, when you remove the ancient landmarks, when you no longer have loyalty to the things that matter, when you no longer have loyalty to truth, then you've got to substitute those ideas, principles, with new principles, new ideas, new culture, a new reality. And you know where that leaves you? That leaves you in moral and spiritual and social and cultural chaos. Now, let me just give you one example. And folks, you know, you want to think, again, that you're past being shocked, because the stuff that they've come up with is so crazy that you just think, who knows what's next? Well, this guy, Richard, I think his name is Richard Levine. He calls himself Rachel. I refuse to call this knucklehead Rachel. I mean, this idiot with this blonde wig on, you know, with the looking like a truck driver trying to wear women's clothes and all that. But he is promoting in health and human services for the well-being of the people, of course, in his warped mind. That's what he thinks he's doing. creating new categories of gender identity as if we didn't have enough. New groups, basically, that need protection as if we didn't have enough. And I've said before, you know where this is going, right? You know where this is going. Because these people are sexual libertines and they want access to kids. They want access to children because they really believe that children are in a position to make sexual decisions for themselves. They believe that. Right now in California, for example, they're trying to pass a law that essentially turns child trafficking into a misdemeanor. I kid you not. Instead of jail time, you would get a misdemeanor conviction and a fine. Oh, and by the way, you wouldn't have to register as a sex offender. Caught having sex with a minor, it would be a misdemeanor and you would not have to be registered as a sex offender. That's where they're going. They don't care about you. They don't care about your family. They don't care about your children. They care about their own power. They care about their agenda, and this is part of their agenda. I'd never even heard of this, folks, and maybe some of you have, but they're in the process of trying to create a new category of sexual orientation. Or maybe it's been there and they're just now sort of exposing it to us, called autogynephiles. Have you ever heard of that? Autogynephiles. AUTOGYNEPHILES. This is Richard Levine's concoction. Autogynephiles. Now you say, well, what is that? An autogynephile is a person who is not a, quote, transgender, because I don't use that term, but is not a person who is genetically, biologically, physiologically one gender, but thinks that he or she can become the other gender, which they can't. But that's not the case. That's not what autogynephiles are. Autogynephiles are people who are clear about their gender. So say, for example, it's a man and he does not think of himself as a woman, does not want to be a woman, is not trying to be a woman. However, he wants to wear women's clothes because that is how he becomes aroused. This is a new category of sexual orientation. Men who wear women's clothes, not because they think they're women, and by the way, women who wear men's clothes, not because they think they're men, but because it provides the arousal that they're looking for. Folks, I'm almost embarrassed to tell you this stuff. I mean, because it just goes to show, and this is a person in a high level position in our government, and this goes to show what they're preoccupied with. I mean, this guy is not offering bold, creative ideas about how to help more people come out of poverty. He's busy coming up with new categories of sexual deviancy to push on you and me and on our children. Because we're unenlightened and, you know, we need to be enlightened. And basically his belief is that these categories are much more important than heterosexuality, because heterosexuality is just kind of an oppressive, an oppressor category. I mean, how in the world did we get here? Well, I'll tell you how we got here. Once you remove God's standards, this is what you get. Because look, human beings are inherently moral creatures. Now let me explain what I mean by that, because it's probably not what you think I mean by that. I don't mean human beings are inherently inclined to obey God's morality. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that God has put on the inside of human beings a need for a moral framework, because he put that need in us so that he could supply that moral framework to us. I mean, so think about this. You know, the sense there's honor among thieves. Well, I don't know about that, but even criminals have certain code of behavior, like snitching, right? I mean, it's considered to be the worst thing in the world. I don't care if the person's committed mass murder. You can't snitch. That's terrible. That's part of their moral code. Being a stand-up guy in a gang, whether it's the mafia or some kind of street gang, is to be willing to do the gang's bidding, including killing someone that the gang says needs to die. That's being stand up. That's being down. You're one of the good ones. That's the code. It's a sick, disgusting, degenerate code, but human beings have to have a moral code. They have to have something that allows them to pat themselves on the back as being good. And yes, even in the criminal world, they have that. So like in prison, for example, the worst thing you can do is go in there and be a pedophile. You know, they say you might not live if you go to the wrong prison and they find you out. You might get killed, because that's not being a good criminal. You know, the good criminals only rob and murder and rape, rape of women. That's not too bad. But the bad criminals, pedophiles, those are the bad criminals. Because it gives even a desperado a sense that, see, I'm a good guy. I'm a stand-up criminal. I have a moral code that I follow. That's inherent in human beings. But when they reject God's moral code, they have to make up one of their own to satisfy themselves of their own inherent goodness. And once you throw away God's, there's no telling where you're liable to stand. Or like here. Like here. You and I are the immoral ones because we don't even know what an autogynephile is. And then you find out what how this another kind of deviancy, another kind of sexual depravity and just perversion, and you realize, oh my goodness gracious, wow. And you're the bad person because you dare to suggest that that behavior is wrong. Well, no, it's not wrong, because we've already redefined right and wrong is whatever people feel, whatever people lust for, whatever people want. If they feel good about something, or they feel they want to do something, that's their code. That's good. That's their truth. And you people coming along with absolute truth saying, no, 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 no. God has set absolute standards, right, wrong, good, evil, moral, immoral. Oh, no, you people are terrible. You are some truly monstrous people who would dare suggest that there's actual right and wrong. And that there's a standard to which I must adhere, set for me by Almighty God. Who do you think you are? Yeah, well, I tell you who I am. I'm a child of God. And the word of God is absolute truth. Jesus said, heaven and earth will pass away, but my word will never pass away. This is what your government is coming up with. While inflation's raging, growth is slowing, people are struggling, debts climbing, not only for the country, but for individuals in the country, basically trying to make ends meet and borrowing money to do so, which is a terrible idea. And here, the guy who is charged with trying to take care of the people who are hurting most in the country, economically, primarily, is busy coming up with new categories of sexual orientation like autogynephiles. We got to recognize them too, because after all, the autogynephiles, how many of them are there? But the autogynephiles are an important constituency for us to recognize and to honor, and we got to have pride in our autogynephiles. I mean, folks, but that's where it gets you when you deny God's standards as the absolute authority on all matters of morality and life. That's where it gets you. Now, look, let me say something to you about something we are doing. You all know about our Forgotten Children Project, America's Forgotten Children. I hope that's the website right there. And that number continues to grow, by the way. I don't have a logo for the Family Restoration Institute, but the Family Restoration Institute grows out of this scourge of violence against these innocent children, because rebuilding the family is one of the critical things that has to be done if we're going to save our country, and particularly save the lives of these children who are being murdered by these thugs who are basically, they're part of this whole moral and cultural relativism. They are being raised not according to Judeo-Christian standards. They're being raised by the streets, and they're being raised by the standard of gangsterism. And so you kill a young kid because you're trying to shoot somebody else. So what? What difference does it make? Who cares? The most important thing is that I was true to my gang, and we went out and tried to kill somebody. And so what? A 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, 6-year-old died. Who? In fact, they are to be commended that they're not moved by the collateral damage. They are not concerned about that. So that's the Family Restoration Institute, trying to address the issues of family, trying to see to it that these young people are raised with a different outlook. And ultimately, rebuilding the family is going to be the way to do that. But here's something I haven't talked to you about, and there's no logo around me to depict it. And that is, we are starting something called the Stand Fellowship of Churches and Ministries. The Stand Fellowship of Churches and Ministries. If you go to our website, standamerica.us, you click on projects, and you scroll down, you see you see Fellowship of Churches. The full name is the Stand Fellowship of Churches and Ministries. But you see Fellowship of Churches. Click on that. That will take you to the page where you'll see the parameters for what we're doing. You can click on the application button at the bottom, telling you basically what we're doing, what our mission is, what our goals are, what the benefits are. You click on the application, fill out the application. There's a $100 fee which goes with filling out the application. There's no charge. No requirement of any other further funds to be transferred, although we do have recommended contributions based upon the size of a church or the size of a ministry. You could do either one. But it's voluntary, strictly voluntary. You don't, to be a member of the Stand Fellowship of Churches and Ministries, you don't have to give anything except for the application fee. The other thing I would say is that this is not some kind of control mechanism or hierarchy. We're not trying to start a denomination. It's just, as the word implies, a fellowship. But what are we trying to do? Bring churches together to support and encourage one another, to help one another, to stand with one another, particularly as we face the issues of the day. And as churches take a biblical stand on the issues of the day, they're going to come under fire. As pastors take a biblical stand on the issues of the day, they're going to come under fire. And we want the Stand Fellowship of Churches to be able to come alongside pastors, support them, encourage them, help them. Primarily moral support. I would hope the day would come when we'd actually have funds that we could share with them in order to help for whatever they needed. But this process is starting. We're hoping to inaugurate this on June 11th at the dinner. And so if you don't have to be a pastor, but if you head up a ministry, okay, if you head up a ministry, you can join, because it's the Stand Fellowship of Churches and Ministries. So if you head up a Christian ministry, you are eligible to join. So go to the website, standamerica.us, go to projects at the top menu, click on projects, go down to Fellowship of Churches, click on that, and you'll get all the information you need. You'll see the information about what it is, how it works, and you'll see an application button to fill out, where you can go and fill out the information that is needed, and then it'll take you also to a payment button to contribute the $100 fee that is necessary for the application. That's all we ask of churches and pastors and ministries that join us, is a $100 fee. And then again, anything else you give, we hope churches will give, obviously, but anything else you give is strictly voluntary. That's why we have a recommended chart. Say, well, if you want to think about how you give, here's what we would recommend based on attendance. And I think it starts at 25 or fewer members. I forget what it is, like $50 a month, and goes all the way up to, if you've got over 10,000 members, here's what you could do. So I would encourage you to do that, because fighting the stuff that we're fighting is going to require that we create more unity and solidarity among churches. And so that's why I say we're not trying to create a hierarchy or denomination, because I want Baptist churches, Pentecostal churches, charismatic churches. I want churches of every background, to be a part of this. And what we're planning to do is have periodic conference calls, probably once a month, but we'll see how that goes, if that's too frequent or certainly no less than that. It'll be either once a month, or maybe once every couple of months, or once a quarter, maybe 4 or 5 times a year. We'll see. We got to feel our way about that one, and sort of get a consensus from the ministers what they're thinking. There's also, we can call special meetings, and we'll probably do some of that as well. I just wanted you to know about the Stand Fellowship of Churches and Ministries, because that's going to become a very, very important part of what we do. And I'm in the process right now of reaching out to pastors, personally calling pastors on the phone and asking them to join the Stand Fellowship of Churches and Ministries. All right, folks. Well, look, I think that's going to do it for this week. And as I said before, I will be in Colorado all next week. I haven't decided exactly what I'm going to do. I want to do the program, but I can't. I'm not going to do it at 6:30 a.m. every morning, because I have to get up at 5 o'clock to do that, and I've got too many other things to do to be trying to burn the candle at both ends all next week. However, what I'm considering doing is maybe doing it later in the day, so that at least I would do it, and you could always grab it on Facebook, because that's probably what I'll do. I'll probably do it through Facebook, and then we'll post it in YouTube, and post it, I think we can post it on Instagram through Facebook as well. That's probably the way we'll do it. But stand by for that. In the meantime, please pray for us, and please support us. We really need your prayers. We need your help. Go to standamerica.us to make a contribution, to buy a ticket, to do a sponsorship for the dinner, and pray as we. If you're, like I said, if you're in ministry, or you got a ministry and you want to be a part of the Stand Fellowship of Churches and Ministries, go to the website and sign up for it. Well, that's going to do it for today. I hope all of you have a wonderful weekend. Have a great time, and go to church. If you're in my area and you're looking for a church to go to that's unapologetically committed to God's Word, that is pro-life, that is pro-family, because the Word of God teaches us to be so, that is pro-America, because this is the greatest place for the spread of the gospel around the world that's ever existed on the face of the earth. And I am not giving up my loyalty to my country because a bunch of leftists have these criticisms that they think are so prescient. They're a bunch of idiots. And they don't do the thing that would prove to me that they really believe that there's a much, much better way to live, which is go find it and leave and go there. They stick around. You know why? Because they know they've got benefits here they don't have anywhere else in the world. So they can forget it. That's why I wrote my book, Sweet Land of Liberty, Reflections of a Patriot Descended from Slaves. So you stand up, step up, speak up, and refuse to back up. because we cannot be defeated if we will not quit, because we are on God's side. Have a great weekend, everybody. God bless.